Hello and welcome to the Awaken Feminine podcast. I'm your host, Kaki Lee, and my mission is to share the love and wisdom of inspiring women from around the world who have gone through adversity and turned their pain into purpose. Today, I'm excited to share the love and wisdom of my 50th guest. She's a climate change professional, an online entrepreneur, and founder of Emrose Kids. Her name is Bobby Thoman, and she's joining me all the way from Niagara Falls in Canada. Welcome.
Hi, how's it
How are
going?
you?
I'm good. I'm well.
Yeah,
How
thank
are
you
you?
so much for joining me on the podcast. Before we dive into our conversation, I really love to know what is your definition of awakened feminine?
Oh my gosh, it's so funny. I've been thinking about this in the title of your podcast because I've never considered myself a feminist, right? It's such a word. It has so much meaning and carries so much weight and means so much to different people. And I think it's the definition of me, right? Somebody who 10 years ago thought like I'm just going to live my life. I just want to be a stay-at-home mom and raise kids, and then like fell in love with a career, and then was exposed to this whole new world and this whole new dynamic of like how I decided to live my life instead. And then finding myself standing up for women's rights in every facet of life. I think that, to me, that's feminism, is just making sure that like everybody is able to have an opportunity and a seat at the table.
Yeah, awesome. I love your definition. So, thank you for sharing that. Now, let's jump into our conversation. We're doing something a bit different today because usually, for our listeners on my previous episodes, you'll find that the journey is usually from one career to another. But our conversation today with Bobby is kind of like I suppose it's still like going from one career to another, but we're talking about the parenting journey. Because before our podcast I met Bobby maybe a couple of months ago, and we had a chat. I'm like, yes, we need to talk about this, and it's about the I guess the division of duties in a household between the husband and wife, and being the primary caretaker. And I really believe that you're a thought leader because you and your husband just decided to do something very different to the societal norms. I'll let you talk about how it all came about, but you both took time off for looking after the kids when you had children. So do you mind just sharing with us how it kind of all came about? Because I know it kind of changed once you had that kind of reality change from moving to the US, where they only have 6 weeks paid maternity, to going to Canada, where you're allowed to have 1 year, even up to 18 months off to look after your child. So I'm going to pass it on to you and just let us know, how that all kind of evolved.
Yeah, and I do want to start out to and say like, recognize that the access that I have to maternity leave is a privilege, and it's not something everybody has, even in Canada, access
Yeah.
to. And so I'm in a very fortunate situation, and I'm speaking from that lens. And then also, a lot of parents are single parents or just have different family dynamics, and so it's just me and my husband. We feel fortunate to be in the position that we're in. So I do. Sorry, my phone is just buzzing here. um, I feel fortunate. But yeah, the journey, it's so funny. I grew up in the United States and I have two older sisters and I was a nanny. And so I just had this societal expectation that 6 weeks was what you got. And it was hard, yes. And it wasn't enough, no, but it was what it was. And women, they live that life every day. And so I just expected that that's like when I envisioned having children, I just expected that that's how my life would unfold. And then I ended up getting a job offer and also meeting my husband around the same time here in Canada, and moved up here and didn't really think about the differences between parental leave policies. And then we found out we were expecting, and I just thought, okay, like a year is crazy to me, right? A year was just beyond comprehension to me. And I said to my husband, all right, like I will take 6 months. I think I'm comfortable taking that time away from my career. And either you take the next 6 months, or we'll find daycare for the kids, or like we'll arrange my parents to come up because we live just at the border of the Canadian U.S. The land border, and so like we'll arrange for my mom to come up, or we'll figure it out. But like 6 months is my max, right?
Yeah.
I didn't know when I said that was not the societal norm in Canada, and I had no idea what journey that would bring me on at that point in time.
That's awesome. Because in Australia, we have, again, I'm also very privileged to have access to maternity leave. So ours is 14 weeks paid leave, but you can take, 1 year or more, depending on your job and your manager's your company's kind of policies on how long you can extend your maternity leave for.
Mhm.
So again, it is a privilege to have it, and it's interesting that you think like a year is way too long. Where uh, for me, I I thought that was way too long too, the first time round. So I think by 6 months, I was like, oh, I think I'm going to go back to work. But the second time round, I'm not. I guess you can still say I'm on maternity leave. I've actually quit my job and had a career change, but I had a much longer maternity leave the next time round, and different viewpoint because it was a changing career. But yeah, definitely awesome how you decided, yep, 6 months and your husband. So what did your husband say when he decided to take 6 months off? Because it's not normal, right? Because I would never have expected my husband to take 6 months. The norm here is for the guy to just take, maybe a couple of weeks off to at the beginning to spend time just to help out, and then they go back to work.
So it's yeah. So at first he thought, so I guess there's two dynamics here, right? First is like I'm very passionate about my career, and I don't want to say he's not passionate about his, but he's more of a like go to work and get things done and come home and live your life type of person where
Hmm.
like I throw all of my energy into the work that I do. So for me it was more like I can't step away from this passion. Like I think I would just go crazy. Like I need this type of stimulation in my life. And for him it was like, yeah, like I want to be a family man and I've never been around kids before and I want to feel these experiences and like do these things. So, and I mean, there's also the financial dynamic, right? Where I do
Mm,
think a lot of times if the husband is like the primary income, then that kind of shifts the situation. But because we're pretty equal in
mm,
our places in the workplace, it was not a huge financial decision for us. So we talked through all these different scenarios and what it might look like. And his biggest fear at the end of the day was what people were going to say. He
mm,
was like, people are going to judge me. They're going to say, like, this isn't natural. This isn't normal. And I was like, I mean, if this is what we want to do and this is what we decide is best for us as a family, then like I'm not worried. Like I can stand up to people all day. That's fine. Like it'll
yeah.
be sure annoying and stressful and require a lot of education and conversation, but like we need to do this because it's what's best for us, not what's best for what people expect of us.
Yeah. I love that because most of us are always. I find it quite funny that that was a thing. That what will other people think? Well, who cares, right? But we're just so programmed to worry about what everyone else thinks when maybe something completely different to the norm fits our family life. So, and what you were saying about, yes, usually the guy, the dad is usually the breadwinner, the one that earns more income. So that's why it ends up that the woman does tend to fall to get, to be the person being the primary caregiver. And, in terms of career, I mean, I love that you're so passionate about your career. And when I went on mat leave the first time, I was in a, managerial role. And, going back, when I went back to work, I couldn't go back into that role. um, and it really does when you step away from your work and you have to go back. And I chose to go back part-time, right, which is, again, you get that. It's like they strip away your rights as an employee when you go back part-time. I don't know
Mm-hmm.
whether you've had experience or you've seen that happen in the workplace where the woman has a baby and they choose not to go back full time, and then they go back still as competent and capable as before, but for some reason they're just not as valued.
I think yeah, so I personally haven't experienced that, but so what evolved from us making this decision was constant conversation and constant research. So I'm just going to take it back a step. One thing that also pushed our decision and what I've been talking about constantly with friends is like I started to realize what they call this like hidden burden of motherhood,
Mm,
where when a mom is home for a year or 18 months, your household norm becomes that you do the cooking, you do the cleaning, you do the laundry, you have the kids' routines down, you know their doctor's appointments, and then you go back to work and you are expected to perform at a high. Whether or not you're expected to perform, I guess, is one question, but you
yeah.
expect yourself to perform, and you
Yeah.
get, it's a burden. And like husbands, when you have that traditional dynamic, don't understand the stress that's on a woman. And it's like,
Yes.
I was reading that like women are working 100 to 120 hours a week, and men are just like living this luxurious life. So we had this whole conversation about like, what is our household dynamic, like whose responsibilities are what kind of thing. And so I do think that what you're talking about is, to me, it's like it's an evolution of how we need to view people in the workplace, right?
Yeah.
Not women who come back from maternity leave and want to work part-time and dedicate more time to their family, but men who want to take time off to be with their family because they found it enjoyable and want to take a step back, right? I
Yeah.
think we need to take gender away from the conversation and talk about what the future of work, especially in a post-COVID world where there's this ongoing conversation about digital and work from home, and can I hire somebody that lives across the country? Like what is the actual need of an employee, and what is their dedication defined by their willingness to drive to an office full time or work part time to be spending more time with family? Like I just think there's a shift in social consciousness that's happening
Yeah.
right now, and like these conversations are more important than ever. And I'm sorry, I will also say like I'm sorry that you experienced that, and I hope that it's not on the fault of you as an individual, but more of like a collective conversation that needs to unfold.
Yeah, I definitely knew it wasn't because of me, but it's just something that I saw in, it wasn't just me, like every single woman that came back had the same experience. And it's funny because before I had children, I never understood that. And then when you become a mum and you see this, inequality, you kind of go, oh, why is this happening? So, yeah, definitely. This is probably another conversation. So let's get back to.
I will just say though, it goes back to your definition of feminism, right? And it becomes like it's happening to you because that's what society expects of women,
Yeah,
right? So, but if we transition and we say like men also can be home, or we also have this expectation of men, then the whole conversation shifts. So I think that part of feminism, oddly enough, is advocating for my husband to be able to
yes,
stay home with his children when he wants, which is not what I would think a traditional definition of feminism is fighting for men's rights too.
yeah. Is having that equality where we both genders can do what suits their life, their family dynamics. I think, we're talking about family. So I want to ask you. So we were just talking about the mental load of a mother. We have all the things that we need to do in the house, and also perform at work, come back home, do everything as well. So, how did you and your husband kind of divide things up so that you didn't have to be the person that remembered all the doctor's appointments and do the cooking and clean the house and, organize everything to do with the kids?
Yeah. So my advice to all my friends who are becoming new moms, and I guess I also want to acknowledge that like we're cisgendered and we're in a man-woman relationship, but I do think that this conversation should evolve and should be had with people in all different
Yes.
types of relationships, because like again, these shifting dynamics, they matter so much in all aspects of equality, right? Not just a man and a woman
Yeah.
in a heterosexual marriage. But I encourage all of my friends, in there seems to be this acceptance that like no matter what, there's a burden on one parent. Like there's always going to be the parent that is responsible for all these things, and sometimes it is the single dad, or it is, but most of the time it's on the woman. And so I often tell my friends, like, listen, my advice to you is about 4 to 6 weeks in, once you get comfortable, make plans to go somewhere with your baby and your husband, but like at lagged times, if it's just your in-laws or your parents' house, and go. Just leave the baby with your husband and don't pack a diaper bag and leave. And guess what? They'll figure it out because they have to. And they'll make mistakes and they'll forget diapers or wipes or butt cream or whatever. Sorry, I shouldn't say cream, whatever. Like they'll forget something, but that's okay because that's how you learn. I think it's when we as women feel that like we must fulfill this role, that we almost kind of enable men or our partners to not pick up the slack, so to speak, because there's no expectation for it. So it was a lot of that. It was constant conversation. it was a lot of discussion around, again, what was being said to us. Like at some points people were insinuating like, well, who's going to pack his lunch, or like if he's home and you're working, like how is he going to eat? And I'm like,
Like he's a grown adult man. He can pack his own lunch.
but really those are the types of things that people will say, right? And so just saying like, hey, we haven't discussed this role before because like it just kind of fell into place, but does it work for us? Is it working for us? And now it's ironic because our second leave is ending. My husband's just going back to work, and he has been responsible for the laundry and all that. And so now he's saying to me like, can you pick up the slack a little bit?
Yeah.
Okay.
What I guess, what that has brought up is how society views men as well, that they're incapable to look after themselves and another human being, which
Mm-hmm.
again is another shift in the programming that we've had from society, that women need to look after the men and they just go out, work, and come home, and that's it. Whereas men, like my husband does the cooking at home. I'm very lucky I'm not the one that does the cooking, and he picks up, he does a lot of the housework as well. So he's more than capable to look after the house and the kids, and that's how our dynamic works. We share everything, and we just whoever's free, I guess, does the work. And so it's really shifting that belief in society that men
Mm-hmm.
can't do what a woman does as well. I mean, I think there's all that conversation about, oh, women can do what men do, but there's also the conversation around the other way around, which actually hasn't been talked about much either.
Oh, you're hitting my core right now. It's honestly, this is the experience that we have lived, right? So, and I think it's just perpetuated at every aspect of society, right? You see like diaper ads that say even a dad can do it. So it's so easy,
Hmm.
even a dad can do it. And it's like, excuse me, of course a dad can do it. A dad can change a diaper. That's not like, why is this a conversation, right? You see viral videos making jokes about dads and like how they take care of babies versus how a mom does it, or showing up to a doctor's appointment and not remembering their age or birth date or middle name. It's like, I'm sorry, but actually I'm the one sometimes who trips up at the doctor's office and can't remember what shots they need and have to pull out the immunization record, right? So yeah, it's an unfortunate conversation that I think we need to be really real with and say, like, stop stop expecting men to not be good dads, because men
Yeah.
can and want to be good dads, and children benefit from having more love in their homes.
Yeah.
And it's also, I will say, so the ironic part of the whole thing is that my brother is a stay-at-home dad, or my brother-in-law is a stay-at-home dad. My sister works full time.
Yeah.
And it's been an evolving conversation because he's in the United States, they're in the US, where again there's, I would say, more of this dynamic of like um, this expectation that men work. And so but it was acceptable to our family, I would say, a little bit more for my husband to stay home because the law allowed for it.
Mm.
Because even though it wasn't the norm, people just kind of said like, oh, Canada, they're, so liberal, and it just sounds very Canadian to do something like that, and
Yeah.
not knowing how it was on the ground. But so it became this constant conversation of like, being a stay-at-home dad is work. He is doing, like, he is supporting his family, and he's
Mm.
allowing his wife to have this rock star career, and that's what works for them. And so yeah, yeah, you really hit me there.
Yeah. And the whole, when the dad looks after the kids they're babysitting, that annoys me, because I'm like, no, they're not babysitting, they're looking after their children. Just like the mum is looking after their children, the mum's not babysitting. So why is it babysitting for the dad?
I mean, and the one comment I'll never forget, we were at a Christmas party and somebody said, oh my gosh, he's such an outstanding father. He took time away from his career to raise his children. And I was like, excuse me, I also took time away from my career to raise my children. Why am I not getting an award, right? Like, why
Yeah.
do men get popped up for doing things that should just be the bare bottom expectation of them, and women get no recognition for it? It's just
Yeah.
it's wild.
Yeah, and something else this just popped into my head. It's a funny story, but not very funny story. A conversation I had with my boss when I was, well, my ex-boss now, second time pregnant. And we were talking, I can't remember the exact conversation, but it was around career and how I was saying, I, I want to advance in my career and I want to do all these things, but because I'm pregnant and I'm going to have a child, I have to step away. And when I come back, it's like kind of starting all over again, right? And the comment he made was like, "Oh yeah, that really sucks."
Yeah.
And it just kind of tells you what how society functions, right? It's just like, "Oh yeah, that sucks, but you just need to suck it up." That's what it is to be a woman. If you want to have children, that's how it is, right?
And that's what I think is our job as women. I had a similar comment made about my colleague the other day who is on maternity leave. And I think it's our job as women to say, even if you don't work directly with them, if you hear these conversations going on, just saying like, hey, as a woman, I don't appreciate that view of parents because that's not my reality, right? Like I went back to work and I didn't have to worry about dropping my kids off at a new daycare and crying. Like I literally just left the house in the morning. I didn't have to worry about any of it because my husband was at home with our children. So to have this view of like, oh, she's stressed out, this is such a hard transition. I mean, it is hard for a lot of women, but it wasn't hard for me because these are the decisions we made for our family. So don't categorize me in that bucket, right? I like my and like I think what you're saying, like your ambition doesn't stop
Mm,
because you have children. Society has to stop looking
yeah,
at women that way. It's
yeah,
just not healthy. And the
exactly.
one conversation that I've heard recently was like we're a valuable resource. We have assets and skills to bring to the table. We have a different perspective that we can provide, which I would argue is what's going to save the planet. But we need to stop wasting this resource, right? Like not capitalizing on women's skills is it's wasting 50% of our population's resource.
Yeah. And I'm finding, I think especially since last year when we were, I mean, probably not in Australia, but the rest of the world, we're all stuck at home. And I got to meet a lot of people, a lot of women online. And I actually find that a lot of mums are even more ambitious, than before, than non-mums of, people that don't have kids, because they want to change the world for a better place for the next generation a lot of times, and show that their children what it's like to really pursue what you want to achieve so that they can do it and not be you know put down and to play small and to just fit into what everyone else says that they need to do. So I found that women, as they become mums, tend to be more ambitious, maybe in a different way. There are, you do it differently, but I mean, the women I met were all entrepreneurs and starting their own business. I mean, you've got an online shop yourself, even though you've also got a career. So I want to actually, let's maybe just, can I touch on that a bit? So how did you decide to have an online shop as well? It sounds like your career is like this amazing, you've got this amazing career that's flourishing, you put a lot of energy to, but also then you've got your online shop as well. So how did that come about? And also, how does your husband support you in that as well?
Yeah. I mean, so I guess I should back up and say that my dad was raised on a farm. And so my whole family kind of lives within close proximity to each other. And there's always been, my sisters and I, we've always been really crafty and kind of always had our own entrepreneurial spirits. And we've always talked about, like, should we start our own business? Should we start a family business? And then Etsy came about and it became, my one sister is like a little bit Etsy famous, I will say. In
Okay.
her craft, she does quilting work, and so I think that made it like easy to have access to a storefront that wasn't a physical building space. And so then I was on maternity leave with our second son, and I just felt that there was like a gap in the market. So what I sell is play couch accessories. And I don't know if you know what a play couch is, but it's a very popular children's toy.
Okay.
And I just found that like the trend was you find out about a play couch, you debate for a year if you want it. You finally get one, then you either get a second one or a bunch of accessories to go with it. But the accessories weren't easy to locate for
Yeah.
me. So I thought, like, all right, this is an opportunity. We have all these skills within my family. Let's bundle up together and do it. And like, I was on mat leave, so I also would say it was like I was getting to that point where my mat leave was coming to an end and COVID was happening, and I was like, all right, I need something a little bit more.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been a journey, right? Like, starting, as I'm sure you're aware, way more than I am, even starting your own business is, it's
Yeah.
a lot of work. It's a lot of work, and he supports me mostly by like letting me dedicate time to either making product or making connections or setting like a Saturday time aside to say like, hey, I know that we both worked all week and we're exhausted, but can you take the kids for a few hours so I can work
Yeah.
on my business? Which
Yeah.
has been incredible.
I love how supportive your husband is. He's amazing. And
Yeah.
I'm going to do a shout out to my husband as well, because since I went down this entrepreneur journey as well and doing my podcast, he's now putting the girls to sleep and, doing all that. And I mean, he does the cooking usually as well. So, he does as well, just support and allow me to have this time. And I think for us, recently he's been wanting to do his own little side business kind of thing as well. So, I just love that you and your husband, have that ongoing communication. And it is the same for us. We just have this ongoing communication. It's like, okay, well, you're doing your podcast, you're doing your coaching, you're, doing all these things, but I want to do this right now. I really feel like I want to do this. And I'm like, okay, well, where can we find the time? So we negotiate the time so that he has dedicated time and I have dedicated time to do my stuff. And it's really, I think when you find a lot of relationships where um, the communication is not clear, a lot of times you just assume or expect the other person to do all these things, right? And until
Mm-hmm.
you communicate, what you like or don't like, the other person's not going to know. And there's that built up of resentment. So I think one of the big points from our conversation is really keeping that conversation channel open with our partners, right?
Yes, absolutely. And it's funny that you mentioned communication, because that's one thing I did want to kind of circle back to when you talked about like, why are men given excuses for not being great? And I do think another challenge that I've seen is there's just not resources out there. Like, there's not like your husband, he does bedtime routine, but when you do bedtime routine and you're stressed out, and I mean, this is a very personal question, but like, I text my friends and I'll say like, oh, I had an awful day today. The kid was like, so and so was teething, and this kid wouldn't eat his dinner, right? Like, and like,
Yeah.
I have these outlets, like these social outlets that I can like vent to, and they can be like, you're a great mom, right?
Yeah.
But men just don't have that. Like, it doesn't
No.
feel normal for like, he has group chats, but it's all about wrestling or football or this or that, and it's
Yeah.
like, so he has started to try and like talk to his friends about being a dad and what it feels like and experiencing it, because for some reason it's a missing resource that they
Yeah.
don't have access to.
Yeah. And I think for me, part of the Awakened Feminine, like my podcast is actually lately I've been going through this transition for my podcast as well. In terms of I think the values and what I believe behind the Awakened Feminine. Awakened Feminine is not just the women, it's also actually the men,
Mm-hmm.
because the communication part is very feminine. Women, it's just easy for us to have a conversation. For us, we met once a couple of months ago and we can just talk. Like, yeah, like, we've known each other for a long time. But for men, for some reason, that communication, they don't talk about feelings because that feminine side has been suppressed, right? It's, men shouldn't show their emotions, they shouldn't cry. And it's that needs to change as well, for men to be able to show their emotions and be okay to talk about their emotions.
Oh my gosh, yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think that was also a part of my journey. So what happened also was when I started this journey, people kind of were along with me they were like, yeah, like, we've never talked about this. I never thought about that way. And then like, we were listening to podcasts and sharing resources. And I don't want to use the buzzword toxic masculinity, but I do think that that is probably the most appropriate way
Yeah.
to describe it. And it's exactly what you're saying, right? Men are expected to not feel emotions. And what they're finding in the US, there was a whole study done that it's actually putting men's mental health at severe risk, that they're at a higher rate, they're having higher suicide rates later in life because they never made genuine and meaningful connections outside of their marriage. So if their spouse passes away or they go through a divorce, they're so isolated because
Yeah.
they don't know how to connect with others. And it's so interesting because I look at my grandpa's generation and like his best friend, he like I can still have coffee with his best friend and he'll say to me like I loved him. I loved that man so much. And there's no awkwardness, there's no shame in it.
Mm.
It's who they were. They were like brothers, they were inseparable and they had their own lives, right? You know what I mean? So like where did this shift in society
Mm.
happen? I don't really know, but like
Yeah.
why can't men feel feelings? And I mean, we are raising two boys, so I'm hyper aware and I think about these things constantly. And like when they cry, I'm now the type of mom that's like, okay, do you want to talk about how you're feeling right now? But I wasn't that person before, and I
Yeah.
wouldn't be that person if we didn't go through this
Yeah.
journey. Yeah,
Yeah. And I
I need
think
to more.
also for women, because I mean, as you're saying, that, I don't really want to use this word, but we've been raised in such a masculine society that even a lot of women, yeah, we can talk quite easily, but they don't like to show their emotions either. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
we can tap in a lot easier and we tend to be able to talk to our girlfriends. There's always that one girlfriend that we can, open our hearts to, whereas men is very hard. But in general, it's still not really acceptable to really talk about your emotions, or if you cry, you're weak, all those kind of things. So it's really being able to, make it normal for us to talk about emotions. We feel our emotions for a reason. We need to find out what that reason is and then go about and, sort out what it is that's causing those emotions so that we can move forward within our lives, right?
Oh my gosh, it's so funny you say that because the other day somebody said to me, "Oh, you're such a strong woman," and I was like, "If only they knew how much I go home and cry." So
Yes.
yeah, but it's a conversation that honestly is evolving in my life right now about like I've been told I'm bossy, I've been told I'm too confrontational, I've been told I need to um like watch myself or like be more cognizant of how you're presenting ideas. And it's like, and I say now I'm starting to say, are you saying this to me because I am that way, or are you saying this to me because I'm a woman?
Mm,
And I think a lot of times it's likely because I'm a woman, and because again, just the norms that are in place don't allow women to act certain ways.
yeah. Because if you were a man, they probably would have said, "Oh, you're so confident," and you know, yeah, it's completely different. It's really being able to change how society views what a man or a woman should be, and really going, well, that's just who I am. I'm confident. You can call it bossy, but I'm confident. I know how to present myself, but people, and I think it triggers people as well when you're a woman. Even for other women, it triggers them, not just triggering the men. It's quite an interesting. It's very interesting, the psychology behind it, because it's just been so normal for so long that it's going to take a bit of time. But the more we talk about it, the more we can get this conversation and this change of reality.
Yeah, and I would say that's the other thing we found, that like when we made this earth-shattering decision that didn't feel earth-shattering to us at the time. Now, and my sister said, because she was in it, my one sister was working at a bank, and they were a European-owned company in the United States, and they offered leave, and one of the guys at her branch was like, "Well, I'm gonna take it," and all the older guys were like, that's not what guys do, and like you should come back to work right away. But he did it, and then after he did it, another guy did it, right?
Yeah.
And that's exactly what we have found has happened. Is my like And sometimes I'm like, is that person doing that? Like, I'm not going to ask them because it's their life and their journey, but like, and they'll come back and they'll be like, we made this decision because of what you and Sean did.
Yeah.
And his even consultants in his industry that he works with have said like, hey, I'm taking the summer off to spend time with my wife and kids because I didn't realize this was an option, or I saw how happy you are that you did it. And so I think that sometimes just the action of doing and just knowing that what you're doing is the right thing. Like you said, like your husband supporting you with bedtime routines, and then like you tell your friend that, and then they're like, hey husband, can you support me in this way
Yeah.
because I need this support, right? I think that just by doing, sometimes I don't think I don't think that what we're doing is earth shattering. I think it should just be the normal.
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree. I totally agree that it shouldn't be earth-shattering, but it is for some. I mean, a lot of my friends do share the responsibilities, but again, it's more maybe the career aspect and taking time off that they don't do because it still falls upon the women to do all of it, right? They might just help with the bedtime routine, but then nothing else, so it's really having that more equal distribution of duties in the household so that is not such a burden and such a mental load on one person. And that's why women a lot of times get into depression or have a meltdown after they have kids. Hello. because because everything just falls upon them. Before you had kids, yes, you were already looking after the house, because it was normal for you to do all the housework, because that was my life before kids. I was doing all the housework, had all the mental load. And it was after I had my first child and then I had a mental breakdown, that's when the conversations between me and my husband really started going to really be able to divide work up and know how I feel and what support I need. Where a lot of women are scared to ask for that support. And it's just really important that if you need help, ask for it, because your husbands are not very good at reading minds, I find. um, and if you don't tell them, they don't know. And it's not their fault. That's just
Nobody's good at reading
no.
minds, right? If you wouldn't know either. So yeah,
No.
but I'm sorry that you got to that place. Like I mean, that's awful. That's the pressure that you were feeling and that you were put in that position. And I think it goes back to this conversation of like, is she having a mental breakdown, or like is society just putting so much pressure on her that like anybody in that position would do the exact same thing, right?
Yeah. So it's just really having, that's why the communication is so important, because from the outside I looked absolutely fine. Like nothing was wrong. Nothing was wrong, and even as I was going through working things out and, through it, no one apart from my husband knew that I was having to work out how to get myself back to normal, or whatever normal is really. But really it is that communication aspect is just so important. Whether you aren't depressed and things are going well, you still need to keep that communication going, because yeah, no one can read minds. Not just men, but no one can read minds. And yeah, we need to be able to be really open with how we're feeling so that we can support each other, because it's not just the husband supporting the wife or the wife supporting the husband. It goes both ways.
Absolutely. And I think another thing that we, like my husband and I and my friends, a couple of my friends who've now split leave with their husbands, have talked about is like, now it's like, am I a bad mom? Right. So like we need to redefine also like what being a mom means. And like I will also say there are women who genuinely just want to be moms, and like all the power to it, because
Yeah.
if that's what you want to do and you want to do it, like I love people who just know what they want to do.
Yeah.
But I think that in my situation, I did like, there is this feeling of like, oh my gosh, am I a bad mom that I'm not taking them to their first haircut? Am I a bad mom for this or that? And like, no, of course I'm not. My kids are taken like so well taken care of and so well loved by both parents. You it's I don't know if that's what you were feeling, but like I felt that a lot. I felt a lot of feelings of like, I'm a horrible person because. But then when you dig deeper, why do I feel this way? Is it true? Is it because it's true, or is it because it's what people expect?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's really letting go of other people's judgments of what you do. As you're saying, people pretty much were judging you guys for this, this decision that you guys made. But like you said, if you are very clear on what you want, it doesn't matter what other people think. Even I do find sometimes mums can be judgmental. The mum that stays at home is judging the mum that's working, and the mum that's working might be judging the mum that's staying at home. But it really is whatever works for the family. We're both quite lucky to have, a partner that's supportive and can share the load. But there are also mums that, as you were saying before, they're single mums, single dads, and or there's not that support, and it's really finding that whatever works to ensure the whole family is happy and looked after, and each every person
Absolutely.
is fulfilled.
Yeah. And my mom was a stay-at-home mom, and like I can't imagine a life without her having been a stay-at-home mom. And like I said, at the beginning, when I envisioned my life, I thought I would always be a stay-at-home mom. So it's so
Yeah,
ironic that we're having this conversation today. One
yeah.
other thing I will say, one conversation that I always kind of try and squash is men in the workplace, going back to like what your boss had said to you when you had like ambition. I also find a pretty dangerous conversation, this belief among men that their job is so important that they can't step away.
Mm,
Um, and how that invalidates my career as a woman, right? To say, like, you can go take time and be with your family, or you should go take time and be with your family. But the men in this company, and I'm not singling out my company or
yeah,
any company, I think it's, again, a larger
yeah,
issue. The men in this company are too important to step away from their job. And I think that conversation has to change.
yeah, exactly. And I think uh, this just kind of popped up as well, that I was talking to you how women are less valued when they go back to work as mums, is because when you're a mum, you're the primary caregiver. So if your child's sick, then you have to go off.
Mm-hmm.
And, you're back at work, but you're not back at work because, your child's sick, so you can't be at work. So it's, again, bringing that conversation so that, it's okay for the men to step away and do that, not just the women.
Yes, absolutely. And I think it was RBG, the U.S. Supreme Court judge. She said that she told her daycare, like, my child has another parent, call them next time. I've done that. Like, not our daycare is phenomenal, and they're great, and they know, like, call both parents, call one, call the other,
Yeah,
different days, right? But like, yeah, don't expect me to be the one to drop everything.
yeah.
If it depends on our schedule and what's going on that day.
Yeah, exactly. And what works for one family doesn't work for another. So it's not having expectations of what it looks like for someone else's family.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I've loved our conversation. I know usually I ask them, all the other questions that I usually ask my guests, but this has been such an awesome conversation, and I really believe that it needs to be out there and be heard. So I'm really thankful for our time together. Is there anything you wanted to add before, we wrap up?
No, I think we've discussed a lot. I think I would just say, if you're listening to this conversation and you're not sure, just start to think about what's best for you and your family and your situation, because it is different for everyone. And so figure out the dynamic and talk about it. Especially, I think what you're saying is key: communication. Like, how is our family going to look when we have kids? And it's never going to look exactly as you plan, but at least if you have expectations set, then when you get there, you know how things need to shift accordingly.
Exactly. And having the conversation with a partner so that both of you have the same vision for your family and not just one going, oh, I expected it this way, but the other person's like, no, no, no. So, yeah, bringing it all back to communication. So, yeah, thank you so much. And I know, usually with my guests, they're coaches or something, but I know you've got an online shop. So, if people want to check out your online shop, where can they go?
Yeah. So I drive everybody to my Instagram because that's just where I'm the most savvy. So Elm Rose Kids, ELMROSE Kids. That's my handle on all social media accounts, but really either elmrosekids.com or the Instagram handle to get to my website.
Awesome. And thank you so much for our conversation. And yeah, if the listeners have any comments they want to make sure you just whenever this is posted up, just comment below, and we can answer anything, or if you want to have a chat about parenting, and if you're having any troubles, I'm always open to have that conversation with you. So thank you so much, Bobby.
Thank you. It was so great speaking with you.